welcome to Business Coder. Today we're going to discuss what is the steps of making desktop application with the server and publish it to store. And in later videos we actually going to build one. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow the steps as we enter to our paid production app. It is actually going to be a fully paid production app. There's a few options when it comes down for building a desktop application. First one is Electron. It is one of the famous GitHub open source projects, and it actually brings the major web technologies to building a desktop application. It makes just an abstraction over the native APIs for the OS, and it has pretty huge adoption in terms of companies like Slack, Atlassian, Microsoft, even Skype built on top of that. There's a huge list of their clients that have built with that. And it's pretty easy to code, but there is some complaints that most of the developers complaining about memory usage because it based on top of Chromium, and because not all developers using web technologies follow the optimization steps. There could be some issues with CPU performance or memory overloads. But from my experience, it also comes down to developer optimization, because currently laptops and the desktop PCs have pretty much powerful processors and a lot of memory. So there shouldn't be any issue related to with the platform itself. I guess it just depends on specific type of applications and how they actually develop. Uh, for the like second option is a pretty popular C++ framework called Qt. It's pretty old. It was developed originally in Nokia for their mobile phones and other devices, but then it went as a separate project, and now they're actually offering that also for licensing. If you have some application that embeds in microprocessors or even cars, they have even promotional video for that. But from my experience, I've done only one desktop app with it, and it's pretty hard to code, especially when it comes to designing the UI components. It's very hard to follow steps because it's a little more complicated than having a web technologies, which is more powerful in terms of building a nice UIs. And another thing is we actually can develop desktop application using just a native APIs and native tools. For example, for the Mac, it could be Xcode with the Swift programming language. They can be pretty powerful in terms of toolset and the UI that you can actually build, but it again comes down to what type of application where we want to have. If we are going to have, for example, cross-platform application, it's pretty hard to manage into multiple platforms, especially if there is a huge changes over time. So we had to support two different code bases alongside with it. So from my perspective, like right now, the choice is still goes to Electron. That's what the most companies are choosing because it's pretty proven in production work, and it's way more easier to build nice looking UIs and animations, which are very similar to what we have right now on our websites. And it's purely JavaScript, which is pretty common in terms of like development. I don't think any developer can run away from JavaScript anytime soon. So there is some downsides, of course, with this choice, Electron, because it's all based on Chromium. But uh, again, it's just, from my perspective, it just comes down to specific developer optimizations that we can have. Uh, so let's just choose Electron for our next desktop application, and uh, just let's move away of this hard choice, and just let's plan our next steps. And by the way, I haven't actually told you that what desktop application we are going to build right now. So it is a productivity tool, I would say. There is a nice small application on a Mac called Self Control. It actually blocks your outgoing internet connections to specific sites. For example, Facebook, Twitter. Sometimes you can actually see that uh, when you are working and it is intentionally you are just typing in the browser facebook.com or twitter.com and spending your next half hour just scrolling a feed. It just distracts from the actual work, and it could shape pretty badly. Uh, so I used this self control tool for a while, and right now it doesn't have like the UI that I needed, and it's not proposed to use automatically, which means that block certain times every time when you are trying to work, or you can set the work times periods, which is essential for time blocking principle. So the app that we're going to build is very similar to this, but with the different user experience that we have. Yeah. So let's just plan a steps what we actually going to do in order to accomplish our application and finally publish it to store. So I use Notion to make my planning happen, and I rely on these steps of documenting things pretty heavily, because along the way you can um lose a focus, or when you don't know where to start, it's pretty hard to understand what is the next steps. So that's why I love just to plan ahead, then move forward. Of course, it is going to change. Uh, Unexpectedly, we can find some issues that we can't do with that. So we just trying to change that whenever it's possible. So I've splitted the work that we have to do as a separate columns, and the first one is app mockup. So the mockup is it's not actually design, but it's more of a understanding how UX going to behave, and from our perspective, because it is something that should work in a background, we should have at least something in a system tray of Mac and Windows later on, if we move forward with that. And another one is just to design UX, how it is going to be, and what user actually needs to see in order to plan that time blocking periods when he don't want to access one of the social media websites. And the another one, this is like pretty important stuff, but we can just split that up or combine multiple steps. So next steps are just setting up our development environment with Electron, which is pretty standard. I will do another video specifically for that. It's just following the steps guide that they have, and also there is some environment based problems that I'll try to follow, because some of the people will get stuck there. And next steps will be, after having development environment set up, we will have definitely like start doing the actual coding of MVP, which stands out minimum viable product, which is basically the uh, functionality that has to be in order to understand the workflow of the application. We'll just come back to that in later videos. Server backend is pretty important because whenever we are deploying an application to a user environment, we just lose control of that. And having something that will track user behavior and suggest what we actually need to do in order to improve their user experience is a very important thing. And also for us, it's very important to understand how many people are actually using our app. Do we need still to work on that, or we just have to move on with another one? And there is a app store publishing step that we are going to do, which is going to be a paid app, probably around $2, purchased once. It's not a subscription, it's just a regular purchased app, some kind of productivity app that most probably non-technical people will download and use. And the final step is obviously a marketing. So I'm not a marketing expert, but for the past couple of projects that I have done, I also made some kind of marketing around that just to get started. It's not going to be a professional guide video, but I'll just try explain for the technical people how they can get started with the marketing their app or their technical product, because sometimes if you are a technical founder or technical expert in terms of app development, you not necessarily have experience with marketing an application. And in this sense, I have some experience, so I'll glad to share that with you. So again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow videos that I'm going to publish, because it will cover all these steps, uh, including the App Store publishing and then monthly check-ins in order to review what is actual downloads and income that we are getting on. And by the way, I named app time blocker, but if you have any other suggestions in terms of the app name or the process that we have, just fill a comment and I'll get back to that. So it is generic process, so we can just move that together. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for joining this channel, and don't forget, be subscribed